Hi, and welcome back to Reddit Terrible Stories. I refuse to let my roommate's partner move in rent free. When Dylan and I signed the lease for our apartment, it felt like the perfect deal. Two bedrooms, one and a half baths, plenty of living space, and a decent kitchen, all for a price we could manage by splitting everything down the middle. I had just gotten out of a disastrous living situation with a roommate who thought cleaning meant spraying air freshener and calling it a day. So moving in with Dylan was a breath of fresh air. He was easygoing, funny, and generally respectful of boundaries. At first, living together was effortless. We'd sometimes watch a movie or grab pizza together, but we also had our own lives and our own circles of friends. We split rent and utilities evenly, kept our groceries separate unless we agreed to share a bulk purchase. And the unwritten rule was that overnight, guests were fine as long as it didn't turn into a permanent arrangement. I thought we were on the same page. Then Dylan met Jenna. At first, I didn't even realize he was seeing someone. She'd come over once in a while, usually for dinner or a movie night. She seemed nice enough, polite, a little shy, and clearly smitten with Dylan. I had no problem with her being around occasionally. After all, it's his home too. But over the next few weeks, I started noticing small changes. Her toothbrush appeared in our bathroom. A blanket I'd never seen before was draped over the couch. There were more shoes by the door than I owned, and none of them were mine. I brushed it off at first. Maybe she was just staying over a little more often. But then came the day I came home from work early and found her cooking in our kitchen. Alone. Dylan wasn't even home. She greeted me like she lived there. "Hey, I made enough pasta for both of us if you want some." And while I appreciated the offer, I couldn't shake the weird feeling that I'd just walked into my own apartment as a guest. Over the next month, Jenna's presence went from occasional to constant. She was there in the mornings when I left for work, there when I got home, and there late at night. She started doing her laundry in our washer and dryer, taking long showers and rearranging things in the kitchen. She had her own shelf in the fridge now, filled with food I didn't buy, but she also helped herself to mine without asking. I didn't say anything at first because I didn't want to come across as petty or territorial. But then the bills started creeping up. Our water bill, which had been pretty steady for months, suddenly spiked. The electricity bill went up too. I knew it wasn't me. My routines hadn't changed. The only difference was that Jenna was now living in our apartment in all but name. One night, I brought it up casually to Dylan. "Hey, have you noticed the bills are getting higher?" I asked. He shrugged and said, "Yeah, maybe the rates went up or something." I pressed a little more. "Do you think it could be because Jenna's here a lot? I mean, she's showering here, doing laundry, using the stove." His face immediately shifted to defensive mode. "She's not using that much, and she's not here that often." I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of that statement. I saw her more than I saw some of my coworkers, but I let it go for the moment. Still, the resentment started simmering. I didn't mind Jenna personally, but I minded the fact that she was living here rent-free, eating my food, using my things, and contributing nothing toward the costs. It wasn't just about the money either. It was about respect. Dylan and I had an agreement when we moved in together, and he was breaking it without even having the decency to talk to me about it. I decided to keep watching and see if maybe the situation would balance itself out. Maybe Jenna would cut back on her visits, or Dylan would bring it up himself. But deep down, I already knew that wasn't going to happen. In fact, I had a sinking feeling things were only going to get worse from here. If you've ever had a house guest who overstayed their welcome, you'll know the exact kind of irritation that builds up over time. At first, you tell yourself you're imagining it, that you're overreacting. But then, one little thing happens, and another, and before you know it, you're keeping a mental tally of every single instance they've taken advantage of your space. That's exactly where I was with Jenna. It started with small annoyances. She would leave her makeup and hair products all over the bathroom counter, forcing me to push her stuff aside every morning just to have space to wash my face. She'd leave dishes in the sink for days, sometimes ones I hadn't even used. My dish soap, my paper towels, my laundry detergent, all mysteriously disappearing faster than they used to. And the food. God, the food. I'd buy a pint of ice cream or a box of cereal, and within 2 days, it would be gone. She always promised to replace things, but she never did. One Saturday morning, I woke up to the sound of my blender running. I don't even use my blender that often, so I walked into the kitchen half asleep to find Jenna making a massive smoothie. She was using my frozen fruit, my almond milk, my protein powder, all of it. She looked at me and said, "Oh, I hope you don't mind. I ran out of mine at my place." I just stared at her, because her place hadn't seen her in weeks. Around this time, Dylan started acting weirdly protective whenever Jenna's name came up. If I so much as mentioned the bills being higher, he'd instantly change the subject or say something like, "You're not seriously going to nickel and dime her, are you?" Nickel and dime her? She was using our apartment as her personal crash pad and contributing absolutely nothing. I decided I needed to have a serious conversation with Dylan. I waited until Jenna wasn't around, and then I sat him down in the living room. "Look," I said, "I don't mind Jenna staying over sometimes, but she's basically living here now. She's here more than you are. If that's going to be the case, she needs to chip in for utilities at the very least, and maybe part of the rent, too." He immediately bristled. "She doesn't have the money right now. She's between jobs. And besides, she's my girlfriend. I'm not going to charge her to spend time with me." I could feel my patience slipping. "She's not spending time with you, Dylan. She's living here, using our water, our electricity, eating my food, doing her laundry. This isn't about being cold or unfriendly. It's about fairness. I'm not going to subsidize your girlfriend's lifestyle." His voice got sharp. "Wow, okay. I didn't realize you hated her so much." "I don't hate her," I shot back. "But I'm starting to resent the situation, and if we don't address it now, it's going to blow up later." He sighed like I was being unreasonable and said, "Fine, she'll buy more groceries." That was his grand solution. No discussion about utilities, no mention of rent, just a vague promise that she'd contribute more food. And surprise, surprise, she didn't. If anything, she started eating more of mine, almost like she was doing it on purpose. By this point, I started wondering if Dylan was just hoping I'd drop it and let the situation slide. But the more he tried to downplay it, the more determined I became not to. I wasn't going to let this turn into a permanent freeloading arrangement, not in my own home. What I didn't realize at the time was that Jenna had already started to think of herself as a full-fledged tenant, and that she had no intention of leaving anytime soon. The turning point came on a Tuesday evening when I came home from work, exhausted, dreaming of reheating the leftovers I'd been saving for dinner. I opened the fridge and they were gone. Not just gone. The container was washed and sitting in the drying rack. I didn't even have to ask who ate them. Jenna was curled up on the couch in sweatpants, watching a show on my Netflix account, sipping a soda I'd bought that weekend. She looked up and said, "Oh, hey, that pasta you made was so good. I hope you don't mind. I was starving." I did mind. I minded a lot. But I just clenched my jaw and said, "Yeah, okay." Later that night, Dylan came home and I pulled him aside. "This can't keep happening," I told him. "Jenna's using the apartment like she lives here. I've been more than patient, but I'm done. Either she contributes to the bills or she starts limiting how much time she spends here." He rolled his eyes. "Dude, you're overreacting. She's not costing us that much." I gestured toward the stack of utility bills on the counter. Our water bill went up by almost $50 last month. Our electric bill is higher than it's ever been. And I'm going through groceries twice as fast. This isn't just about a couple of extra showers. This is about an extra person living here. Dylan got that defensive tone again. "She's not a stranger. She's my girlfriend. I want her here. And if you were in my position, you'd want the same." That's when I realized we were never going to agree. To him, this was about his relationship. To me, it was about fairness and boundaries. And the two were never going to line up. So I laid it out clearly. If Jenna's going to keep living here, she needs to start paying her share. Rent, utilities, the works. If she can't do that, then she needs to go back to her own place most nights. Those are the options. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he just shook his head and said, "You're unbelievable." From that night on, the atmosphere in the apartment changed. Jenna started avoiding me, or maybe ignoring me. When we did cross paths, she'd make these little passive-aggressive comments. "Oh, don't worry, I'll use my own milk this time," or "Guess I should ask before I use the TV, huh?" Always with that sarcastic edge. Dylan stopped hanging out with me entirely, unless it was to discuss something about the lease or bills. And even then, it was short and tense. And then came the cat. One Friday, I got home and saw a litter box in the corner of Dylan's room, along with a scratching post in the living room. Jenna's cat. No warning, no conversation, just there. I actually like cats, but I'm allergic enough that being around one all the time makes me congested and gives me headaches. I asked Dylan what was going on, and he just shrugged. Jenna needed a place to keep him for a while. That's when I realized they weren't just ignoring my boundaries, they were actively pushing them to see how much I'd tolerate, and I was done tolerating. I decided it was time to start documenting everything. Every extra cost, every missing grocery item, every time Jenna stayed over when Dylan wasn't even home. If they wanted to pretend this wasn't a problem, fine. I was going to make sure I had proof, and deep down, I already knew that proof would be the first step toward getting out of this living arrangement for good. Once I made up my mind to track everything, I went all in. I started keeping receipts for every grocery trip, noting what was mine and what disappeared mysteriously within days. I took pictures of the fridge before leaving for work and compared them when I got home. I made a spreadsheet for utility bills, marking the average costs before Jenna's unofficial move-in and the inflated numbers after. I even started noting the dates and times I saw her in the apartment without Dylan around. It wasn't about spying, it was about proving a point, because I knew that if I ever confronted Dylan again, he'd try to brush it off like before. It was shocking how quickly the evidence piled up. In 1 month, the water bill was up 45, the electricity bill up 30, and I'd spent an extra 60 on groceries, just replacing things she ate. And it wasn't like she was apologetic about it. If anything, she acted entitled to it. One day I came home to find her wearing one of my hoodies. She laughed and said, "Oh, I grabbed it from the laundry because it looked comfy. Hope you don't mind." I did mind, but saying that would have turned into another sarcastic jab from her. The tension in the apartment was thick. Dylan and I barely spoke unless it was necessary, and Jenna was always there, lounging in the living room, scrolling on her phone, or blasting music from Dylan's room while he was at work. It was like she was making a point of claiming the space. One night I decided to test the waters and brought up the bills again. I said, "Hey, Dylan, the utilities are up by another $40 this month. That's not normal." He sighed like I was the most annoying person on the planet and muttered, "Yeah, I know, but what do you want me to do about it?" I kept my voice calm. "Split the difference 3 ways. It's fair." That's when Jenna, from the couch, piped up without even looking at me. "Oh my God, you're seriously charging me to shower and exist? That's pathetic." My blood boiled. No. What's pathetic is living somewhere full-time and pretending you're just visiting. You're using utilities, eating food, and taking up space. You're not a guest, Jenna. You're an unofficial tenant. She finally looked at me. Her eyes narrowed. "Maybe you should learn how to be less stingy." Dylan jumped in. "All right, that's enough. I'm not going to make her pay rent. Drop it." I didn't say anything else that night, but I was done hoping they'd see reason. If they weren't going to change, I was going to change my situation. My plan became simple. Finish collecting evidence for another month, then give my 30-day notice when the lease renewal came up. By mid-month, the spreadsheet was damning. Between utilities, food, and cleaning supplies, Jenna's presence was costing me over $200 extra every month. That's not even counting the value of my time or the stress of constantly feeling like a stranger in my own home. The only thing left was to wait for the right moment to drop the news and make sure it landed like a brick. The right moment came sooner than I expected. It was a Thursday evening, and I'd had one of those days at work where everything went wrong. Deadlines missed, emails piling up, and my boss breathing down my neck. I walked into the apartment dreaming about collapsing on the couch with a frozen pizza and zoning out to some mindless TV. Instead, I found Jenna sitting cross-legged on the couch, wearing my hoodie again, watching a reality show at full volume, and eating the pizza I'd bought the night before. My unopened frozen pizza, the one I had literally been picturing all day. I stood there for a good 10 seconds, just staring, hoping maybe she'd notice the storm brewing behind my eyes. She didn't. She just looked over casually and said, "Oh, hey, I made your pizza. Hope that's cool." It was not cool. I didn't yell. I think my voice was actually calmer than usual, but there was an edge to it that even Jenna seemed to notice. "You know what's not cool? Eating someone else's food without asking. Again. And sitting here like you own the place when you don't even live here." At least, not officially. She rolled her eyes. Are we seriously doing this again? Dylan said you'd chill out about it. I turned to see Dylan walking in behind me, holding a bag of takeout. Chill out about what? I asked him. He set the food down, clearly already annoyed. About you constantly making a big deal out of Jenna being here. You need to get over it. She's part of my life, so she's going to be part of my living space. Living space, I repeated. That's interesting because last I checked, this was our apartment, not yours to unilaterally decide who lives here. And if she's going to be here more than half the time, she should be paying her share, period. Jenna smirked like she'd won something. Maybe you should stop keeping score like some bitter old landlord. That was it. That was the moment I realized nothing I said was going to change either of their minds. So I looked Dylan dead in the eye and said, fine. If you want her here full-time, she can be here full-time without me. When the lease renewal comes up next month, I'm not signing. You can figure out how to pay for this place yourselves. Dylan's face went pale. Wait, what? You're just going to bail? I'm not bailing, I said. I'm giving you a month's notice, which is more than fair considering the last several months you've been ignoring my boundaries and letting someone live here rent-free at my expense. I've been more than patient. I'm done. The rest of that evening was silent, except for the sound of the TV. Dylan didn't try to argue further, and Jenna avoided looking at me entirely. I went to my room, opened my laptop, and started checking apartment listings. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. From that night forward, things in the apartment took on the feel of a low-level siege. Nathan didn't exactly move out, but he stopped making an effort to be friendly. He avoided me in the kitchen, muttered under his breath when passing in the hallway, and left dirty dishes piled in the sink for days at a time. Sophie, meanwhile, was clearly split between loyalty to her boyfriend and her own stake in the apartment. She stopped asking me to reconsider, but I could tell she resented me for making her life harder. Meals that used to be communal became solitary affairs. The once shared grocery bill now had sharp lines drawn through it, her food in one corner of the fridge, mine in another. Nathan's taking up random spots as though staking a claim. There was also the matter of the utilities. Before, Sophie and I split them evenly. Now, with Nathan spending every night there, I noticed the electricity and water usage creeping up. The showers were longer, the lights left on more often. The heat turned up a few degrees. I brought it up once casually, and Sophie's tight-lipped response made it clear she wasn't going to take responsibility for his share. In retaliation, I started keeping track of every extra expense. If I had to pay for the additional usage, I wanted a record. But it wasn't just about the money anymore, it was about the principle. I felt like I was being pushed into subsidizing someone else's comfort, without consent. The tension became a kind of background noise, humming through the apartment day and night. Sophie began inviting Nathan over earlier in the day and having him leave later at night, just enough to maintain the fiction that he wasn't living there full time. I caught him doing laundry in our machine on 2 separate occasions, which to me felt like crossing another invisible boundary. The worst part was the passive-aggressive little reminders left around like an empty beer can left in my designated kitchen cupboard, or my food containers mysteriously going missing. Sophie never admitted it, but I suspected Nathan was doing it on purpose. And every time I thought about calling them both out, I realized we were already too deep into this Cold War. Neither of us wanted to be the one to escalate it into open conflict. Yet, the more I thought about it, the more I realized that an explosion might be inevitable. One evening, while they were both out, I sat in the living room staring at the blank TV screen and wondered how much longer I could keep living like this. I wasn't just dealing with an unwanted guest, I was slowly losing my home. And in that moment, I decided that if Sophie and Nathan were determined to play games, I'd be ready with rules of my own. The morning after Jamie's door slamming incident, I woke up to the smell of coffee. Normally, that would be a comforting sign of a peaceful morning, but not this time. I walked into the kitchen to find Jamie making himself breakfast, shirtless, and blasting music from his phone. He barely glanced at me before saying, "Oh, good, you're up. I used the last of your milk." No, please, no, thanks. No attempt to replace it, just entitlement. I ignored it, poured myself some black coffee, and started scrolling through my phone. That's when I saw a Venmo request from Lily for half the internet bill. This was new. I walked back to my room and double-checked my lease documents and receipts. It was clear. Utilities were split between me and Lily, not her plus a bonus freeloader. So why was I suddenly paying for Jamie's Netflix binging? Later that day, I texted Lily, "Hey, just got a request for extra internet money." "What's up with that?" she replied. "It's just fair that you pay for Jamie's usage too." I stared at my screen, completely floored. Fair? How was it fair for me to pay for a guy who hadn't paid a dime in rent, let alone signed a lease? I wrote back, "No. I agreed to split utilities with you, not your boyfriend." She left me unread. That evening, I came home to find the living room rearranged. Jamie's gaming setup was now in the middle of the space, wires everywhere, his chair practically blocking the hallway. My once cozy living area looked like a cheap esports arena. "What is this?" I asked. Jamie didn't even pause his game. "Better use of the space," he mumbled. Lily popped out of her room and said, "We needed more room for his desk. You don't mind, right?" My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. "Yes, I mind. This is our apartment, and I didn't agree to live with him." Lily rolled her eyes. "You're being dramatic. He's basically family now." That word family was like gasoline on a fire. I wasn't going to let someone I barely tolerated be labeled as family, especially when he was squatting rent-free in my home. I took a deep breath and said, "We need to talk, all of us, tonight." At 8 p.m., I sat them both down at the dining table. "Jamie, you've been living here for 2 months without paying rent. You're using utilities, rearranging the place, and now I'm expected to cover extra bills for you. This stops now. Either you start paying your share or you move out." Jamie laughed. Actually laughed. "Wow, you're really making this about money? Pathetic." Lily jumped in. "He's between jobs. You're seriously going to kick him out in this economy?" I stayed calm, even though my hands were shaking. "This isn't my responsibility. I didn't sign up for this arrangement." Jamie leaned back in his chair, smirking like he'd already won. "Lily says I can stay as long as I want, so looks like you're outnumbered." And that's when I realized he wasn't just freeloading. He was planning to stay indefinitely, and he thought I couldn't do anything about it. He was wrong. Very, very wrong. The morning after Jamie's door slamming incident, I woke up to the smell of coffee. Normally that would be a comforting sign of a peaceful morning, but not this time. I walked into the kitchen to find Jamie making himself breakfast, shirtless, and blasting music from his phone. He barely glanced at me before saying, "Oh, good, you're up. I used the last of your milk." No, please, no thanks, no attempt to replace it, just entitlement. I ignored it, poured myself some black coffee, and started scrolling through my phone. That's when I saw a Venmo request from Lily for half the internet bill. This was new. I walked back to my room and double-checked my lease documents and receipts. It was clear. Utilities were split between me and Lily, not her plus a bonus freeloader. So, why was I suddenly paying for Jamie's Netflix binging? Later that day, I texted Lily, "Hey, just got a request for extra internet money." "What's up with that?" she replied. "It's just fair that you pay for Jamie's usage too." I stared at my screen, completely floored. Fair? How was it fair for me to pay for a guy who hadn't paid a dime in rent, let alone signed a lease? I wrote back, "No. I agreed to split utilities with you, not your boyfriend." She left me unread. That evening, I came home to find the living room rearranged. Jamie's gaming setup was now in the middle of the space, wires everywhere, his chair practically blocking the hallway. My once cozy living area looked like a cheap esports arena. "What is this?" I asked. Jamie didn't even pause his game. "Better use of the space," he mumbled. Lily popped out of her room and said, "We needed more room for his desk. You don't mind, right?" My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. "Yes, I mind. This is our apartment, and I didn't agree to live with him." Lily rolled her eyes. "You're being dramatic. He's basically family now." That word family was like gasoline on a fire. I wasn't going to let someone I barely tolerated be labeled as family, especially when he was squatting rent-free in my home. I took a deep breath and said, "We need to talk. All of us." tonight. At 8 p.m. I sat them both down at the dining table. Jamie, you've been living here for 2 months without paying rent. You're using utilities, rearranging the place. And now I'm expected to cover extra bills for you. This stops now. Either you start paying your share or you move out. Jamie laughed. Actually laughed. Wow, you're really making this about money? Pathetic. Lily jumped in. He's between jobs. You're seriously going to kick him out in this economy? I stayed calm, even though my hands were shaking. This isn't my responsibility. I didn't sign up for this arrangement. Jamie leaned back in his chair, smirking like he'd already won. Lily says I can stay as long as I want. So, looks like you're outnumbered. And that's when I realized he wasn't just freeloading. He was planning to stay indefinitely, and he thought I couldn't do anything about it. He was wrong. Very, very wrong. The night everything came to a head started like any other me in my room, trying to unwind after a long day, and Mark and Chloe in the living room watching some show, their laughter occasionally bursting through the walls. But around 10 p.m., I got up to grab a glass of water, and as I walked into the kitchen, I froze. Chloe was rummaging through the pantry, pulling out food I had clearly labeled as mine. I stood there for a moment watching before finally saying, "Hey, those are mine." She looked at me without a hint of embarrassment and said, "Oh, I didn't think you'd mind. We're all kind of sharing things now, right?" My jaw clenched. "No, we're not. You don't pay rent. You don't contribute to groceries. This is not a communal setup." She rolled her eyes like I was being unreasonable and walked past me, granola bars in hand. I went to Mark and told him flat out, "Your girlfriend needs to replace the food she took, and you need to stop pretending this situation is okay." Instead of apologizing, he got defensive. "Dude, you're acting like a landlord or something. It's not that deep." "It's exactly that deep," I shot back. "I work hard to pay for this place. I'm not here to bankroll your relationship." The tension between us was now palpable, every conversation edged with resentment. The final straw came 2 days later when I found my bathroom toiletries missing from the cabinet. When I confronted Chloe, she said she borrowed them. Borrowed shampoo? Toothpaste? I felt my patience snapping. That night, I sat Mark down and told him he had 30 days to figure things out because the lease renewal was coming up, and I wasn't willing to sign with him if Chloe was still living here rent-free. He stared at me for a long moment and then muttered, "Wow, I didn't think you'd turn out to be this selfish." I laughed, bitter and tired. If expecting basic fairness makes me selfish, then fine. I'm selfish. The following week, I started actively looking for a new roommate. I posted an ad with clear terms. One tenant, no couples, unless both are paying rent, no exceptions. Within days, I got a promising lead, someone named Jordan, a graduate student who needed a quiet place to focus on their thesis. We met and they seemed respectful, financially stable, and uninterested in drama. By the end of our conversation, I was almost giddy at the thought of sharing the apartment with someone who valued boundaries. Meanwhile, things with Sam and Chloe had reached their natural conclusion. Without the free rent and without me budging, Chloe decided she wasn't going to waste her time in a place she couldn't fully control. She moved out abruptly one Tuesday morning, taking all her belongings and leaving behind a surprisingly polite note. No hard feelings, just not the right fit. I knew that was her way of saving face, but I appreciated the lack of theatrics. Sam moved out 2 days later. He didn't say much, just a short, awkward goodbye in the hallway. For the first time in weeks, the apartment felt calm again. I took a deep breath and realized how much tension had been eating at me. I had spent so much time second-guessing myself, wondering if I was being unreasonable, only to see that holding firm had saved me months, maybe years of resentment. A few days after they left, Jordan moved in. From day one, the difference was night and day. They paid rent early, kept their space tidy, and we had a mutual understanding of boundaries. The place became peaceful again, almost meditative. I could come home without bracing for conflict or an argument over fairness. Looking back, I realized that saying no was the best decision I could have made. It wasn't about being inflexible. It was about protecting my home, my finances, and my sanity. If I had let Chloe move in rent-free, I would have been silently fuming every month, while paying for someone else's living expenses. Instead, I stood my ground, and my life became lighter because of it. The experience taught me something valuable. People who respect you will understand your boundaries. People who don't will try to guilt you into crossing them. And the sooner you recognize which kind of person you're dealing with, the better. Sam and Chloe may have thought I was cold or selfish, but that's okay. I can live with that, especially now that I can come home to a space that's truly mine.